She was a ghost of a mother, and the baby was her only proof of life. But when the real mother returned from the grave of her grief, one of them would lose their child forever. The wind, a ghost with no home, swept across the high plains. It found no purchase on the low sod house, only dust and a woman named Ada. She was a silhouette against the endless sky, her hands in the soil, planting seeds she hoped would grow. The sun, a relentless eye, watched her. She moved with a practiced, sorrowful rhythm, a widow's dance with the earth. A basket, lined with a worn blanket, rested beside her. A low, gentle hum came from within it. Ada's movements, slow and deliberate, were a prayer for something to thrive where nothing had. The land had taken her husband, her child. It had left her with a quiet, hollowed-out stillness. But now, in the basket, there was a weight, a promise. A cry pierced the stillness, not the wail of a child in distress, but a small, seeking sound. Ada stopped, her hands caked in the dark earth, and knelt. She peered into the basket. A small face, soft as new-spun cotton, looked back at her. The baby, no more than 6 months old, made a cooing sound and reached a small hand toward Ada's face. Ada's lips, chapped and dry, curved into a fragile smile. The child's name was Willow. She had found her a month ago, abandoned in a trapper's lean-to, wrapped in a blanket as coarse as burlap. The trapper was gone. The baby was silent and still until Ada picked her up. The world had given Ada a second chance, a life to hold, a grief to mend. Ada picked up the child and held her close. Willow's head rested against her shoulder. The soft weight of her was a balm to the ache in Ada's chest. She carried the child inside the small, cool sod house. The interior was a study in scarcity, but it was clean. A small bed, a table, and a pot-bellied stove. A single, faded photograph on the wall showed a man with kind eyes and a woman with a hopeful smile. Both were gone now. Ada had buried them side by side a few hundred feet from the house, marked by 2 simple crosses of weathered wood. The wind was their constant mourner. She fed Willow, a meager paste of cornmeal and water, and watched the baby eat with a fierce hunger. Ada's own hunger was a dull thing she had long since learned to ignore. She lived for the baby now. The child was a world unto herself, a universe of quiet discovery. Ada spent her days talking to her, telling her stories of the sky and the wind, of the animals that passed and the plants that grew. Willow would watch her with wide, trusting eyes, her small hands grasping Ada's rough fingers. Ada would whisper, "My child," a secret confession to the silent walls. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, a rider appeared. Ada watched from the small window, her heart a drumbeat against her ribs. The figure was a woman, her posture straight and weary, her horse a dust-caked ghost. The woman dismounted with a slow, deliberate grace and approached the sod house. She was tall, with a fierce, angular face and hair the color of midnight. She moved with a quiet, dangerous purpose. Ada stepped out onto the porch, her hand unconsciously rising to her chest. "Evening," she said, her voice thin in the vast quiet. The woman's eyes were the color of storm clouds. They swept over Ada, then over the sod house, lingering on the window. She did not return the greeting. "I am looking for a child," she said, her voice low and resonant, a sound of the earth. "A baby girl. She was left behind." Ada's breath caught. She felt a cold dread spread through her veins. This woman, she knew, was the mother. The fear was a living thing in her throat. Ada thought of Willow's small face, her trusting eyes, the way her little fingers wrapped around her own. She could not, would not, give her up. "I have seen no one," Ada said, her voice a brittle lie. "This is a lonely place." The woman's gaze did not waver. She saw the tremble in Ada's hand, the way she clutched the rough fabric of her dress. "She would be about 6 months," the woman said. "She has a small birthmark, like a star, on her left foot." Ada's mind raced. She had seen the birthmark. She had traced it with her finger. A tiny constellation on the pale skin. It was real. Ada held her ground. She was a mother, not by blood, but by sorrow and by choice. "There are no children here but my own," she said. The words, a quiet declaration of war. The woman's face, a mask of stoicism, cracked. A flicker of something, a profound pain crossed her features. "Please," she said, the word a raw thing torn from her throat. "Her name is Willow. I was told she was taken to a place with a sod house." Ada's heart broke for this woman, for her grief and her journey, but her heart was also a stone, and it held Willow close. "My child is named Willow," Ada said. The lie was now an absolute truth, a fortress built of love and desperation. The woman, whose name was Ilara, stood for a long time, her eyes searching Ada's. The sun had gone down, and the vast, empty sky was a canvas of fading light. A wind, colder now, swirled around them. Ilara finally turned. She did not plead again. She simply mounted her horse. "I will not forget," she said, the words a promise and a threat, and rode away into the deepening twilight. The days that followed were a tightrope walk over an abyss. Ada lived in a state of hypervigilance, every sound a potential threat. The creak of the door, the rustle of dry grass, each was a phantom footstep. She kept Willow close, a small, warm weight that tethered her to the world. She would watch the horizon for hours, her eyes straining against the sun. There was no sign of Ilara. The quiet of the plains, once a comfort, was now a constant, unnerving presence. One afternoon, Ada was mending a torn blanket when she heard the unmistakable sound of a horse approaching. It was not Ilara. It was a man, riding a fine, bay stallion. He was tall, with a weathered face and a gaze that seemed to hold the weight of the land. He dismounted, his movements as fluid and silent as a predator. He introduced himself as Jasper. Jasper was a tracker. He was looking for someone who had gone missing from the nearby settlement, a young man who had been prospecting in the hills. He asked Ada if she had seen anyone. She had not. He then asked for water, and Ada, her heart still a tight knot of suspicion, gave him some. He sat on the small porch, his eyes scanning the horizon, his presence a stark, imposing contrast to the loneliness of the place. He was quiet, but his silence was not empty. It was filled with an attentiveness, a deep well of observation. He noticed the small, carved wooden horse Ada had given Willow, the way the child's small hand clutched it. He saw the way Ada's eyes never strayed from the child, a fierce, protective focus. He saw the two lonely crosses on the hill and the well-worn path that led to them. "You've been through it," Jasper said, his voice a low rumble. Ada did not answer. She simply watched him, her gaze a question. "A woman loses a child," he continued, his eyes on the far horizon. "A different kind of wound. Leaves a different kind of scar." Ada felt a chill. She did not know how he knew, or if he was simply making a general statement. "I lost my son," she said. The words a ghost. "And my husband. To the fever." She held Willow a little tighter. "I'm sorry," Jasper said. He did not ask for details. He simply let the silence hang between them, a shared understanding of grief. The next day he returned. And the day after that. He was looking for a specific kind of rock formation, he said. He would ride out in the morning and return at dusk. He would sit on the porch, a quiet companion, his presence a strange sort of comfort. He brought Ada a sack of cornmeal, a small act of kindness that made her throat ache. He never spoke of Willow or of Ilara, but Ada felt his eyes on them, a silent, knowing presence. He was a man of few words, but Ada began to tell him things. Not about Willow, never about Willow, but about her husband Elias and their son Finn. She told him of the hopes they had shared, of the dreams for their homestead that had been buried with them. She told him of the quiet that had settled over her, a silence so profound it had threatened to swallow her whole. Jasper listened, his face impassive, but his eyes were kind. He was a silent witness to her grief, a sturdy anchor in a sea of loneliness. One evening, as the stars began to pinprick the darkening sky, Jasper stood to leave. "I know her," he said, his voice quiet. Ada's heart stopped. "Who?" she asked, a whisper. "The woman," he said, "the one you met. Her name is Ilara. She's a homesteader too, lost her husband and her home in a fire." She lost her child too, or so she thought. He paused, his gaze meeting Ada's. She gave birth in a trapper's lean-to, a long way from her place. She was hurt, bad, a rattlesnake bite. She left the baby there, wrapped up, and rode to get help. She thought she would be back in an hour or two. The fever took her, and she was laid up for a month. When she went back, the baby was gone. She has been looking for her ever since. Ada's world tilted. Ilara had not abandoned her child. She had been a grieving mother, just like Ada, a woman fighting for a life she had lost. Ada looked down at Willow, sleeping soundly in her arms. The weight of the deception was a crushing burden. She had taken this child, not from a woman who had abandoned her, but from a mother who had fought for her life, a mother whose grief was as vast and as deep as her own. "She's coming back," Jasper said, his voice low and solemn. "She's got people with her, a few men from her settlement. They're coming to take the child." Ada felt a cold dread, a terror that was not for herself but for Willow. "They can't," she said, her voice a plea. "She is mine. I saved her. I gave her life." Jasper's face was a study in sorrow. "She is hers, Ada, by blood, and the law. It's a war, and you can't win." The word, war, hung in the air between them, a stark and brutal reality. It was not a war of bullets and blood, but a war of mothers, a war of grief and loss, a war of love and desperation. Ada watched Jasper ride away, his silhouette fading into the endless night. She was alone again, but this time the quiet was no longer empty. It was filled with the terrible drumming of a battle to come. The dawn arrived, not as a gentle awakening, but as a hard, unforgiving light. Ada sat in the silent sod house, watching Willow sleep. The baby was a perfect, peaceful thing, her small chest rising and falling with quiet breaths. Ada ran her finger over the baby's cheek, the skin soft as a petal. She thought of Ilara, of the pain that must have driven her, of the journey she had made. Ada had lived in a world of her own sorrow, her own righteous claim. Now she saw the world from a different angle, a mirror reflecting a grief as profound as her own. The days stretched on, the hours a slow, agonizing crawl. Ada did not eat. She did not work. She simply sat, holding Willow, watching the horizon, waiting. The sun climbed to its zenith and began its slow descent. Ada saw them then, 3 riders, a cluster of dark shapes against the vast expanse of the plains. They were moving with a slow, deliberate pace, a procession of grim purpose. At the head was Ilara, her posture still straight and unyielding. Beside her were 2 men, their faces unreadable from this distance. Ada felt the fortress she had built of lies and love begin to crumble. She could not fight them. She could not win. It was a truth as cold and hard as a winter stone. The law was on their side. The blood was on their side. All Ada had was a truth she had created, a life she had borrowed, and a heart that was breaking. When they arrived, they dismounted in a quiet, solemn row. Ilara came forward, her eyes not on Ada, but on the small wooden horse on the porch. One of the men, a tall man with a kind but firm face, spoke. "We are here for the child, ma'am. Ilara has a claim. We can make this easy, or we can make it hard." Ada said nothing. She clutched Willow tighter. The baby stirred, her small face scrunching up in her sleep. Ilara stepped forward. She did not look at Ada. She looked at the child. Her face, a mask of grim determination, began to soften. Her eyes filled with a liquid sorrow. She had seen the child she had mourned, the child she had fought for. The reality was not a vision or a memory, but a living, breathing thing. "Willow," Ilara whispered, the name a reverence. Ada felt a profound shift. The war was not between them, but between their griefs. They were 2 sides of the same coin, 2 women hollowed out by loss. The fortress in Ada's heart finally broke. She looked at Ilara, truly looked at her. She saw not a rival but a mirror. She saw the ghost of her own lost son in the eyes of this woman, in the ache that radiated from her. Slowly, carefully, Ada held Willow out. The child, awakened by the shift, blinked her eyes open. Her small, trusting gaze found Ilara. Ilara's hands trembled as she reached out. She took the baby, holding her close, her face buried in the soft fabric of the baby's blanket. A silent sob racked her frame. Ada stepped back, the world a sudden, cold vacuum. The weight was gone. The warmth was gone. The quiet of the homestead returned, but it was a different kind of quiet. A quiet of loss, but also of a terrible, profound surrender. Ilara lifted her face, her eyes red-rimmed. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her gratitude was a silent, aching thing. She turned, the men moving to give her space. She mounted her horse, the baby held close to her chest. Ada watched them ride away. The wind, once a ghost, now felt like a friend. It had taken so much from her, but it had also brought her a gift, a brief, fragile grace. She stood on the porch, a solitary figure against the endless sky. The sun was setting, a bruised purple and orange. Ada went inside. The house was empty, the silent walls a testimony to what had been. The small wooden horse lay on the floor where Willow had dropped it. Ada picked it up, her fingers tracing the worn carving. The world was cold again. The grief had returned, a silent, familiar companion. But this time, it was different. It was cleaner. It was a grief born of sacrifice, not of stubbornness. It was a grief that, for a few short months, had been filled with a borrowed love. And that, she knew, was a thing no one could ever take from her. She had been a mother in the truest, most human way. She had loved with all she had. And now, she was alone. But a new seed had been planted in her barren heart. The knowledge that love, even when lost, could never be truly taken. It had a life of its own. She placed the small horse on the mantle, a marker of a life that had been, and a promise of one that would, somehow, begin again. If you enjoyed this incredible tale from the frontier, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories from the American West. Click on the video on the screen for another tale we think you will love.